Okay, good morning, colleagues. It's 10:05, so welcome to this Alliances for Action webinar. We're very happy to have you all here today with us. We have now online 80 participants, so welcome everyone. As you can see, all participants are muted, but please, we will welcome if you can also put your comments and questions in the chat. In the end, there will be a Q&A session where we're going to have an open discussion. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and will be uploaded in CARDI's YouTube channel. And we will put the link in the chat later for you to look at it if you would like to see. We will also send it by email. So to begin with today's activity webinar, I will hand over to my dear colleague Andrina Simon from the OECS CBU for some introductory remarks to make the start to begin this webinar. So please, Andrina, over to you.
Thank you, William. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this Alliances for Action webinar to support the coconut industry in the Caribbean, with a special focus today on the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. It is indeed a great pleasure and honor for me to be here on the occasion of the opening of this very important webinar, focusing on standards for coconut products in the OECS countries. First and foremost, we would like to begin by thanking our donors, especially the European Union, the CARIFORUM Directorate, and the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. The Alliance for Coconut Industry Development for the Caribbean project would not have been possible without your support. We would also like to express our gratitude to strategic partners such as the OECS Commission, Competitive Business Unit, Caribbean Agriculture Research and Development Institute, CARDI, and the Coconut Industry Board of Jamaica. The demand for coconut products worldwide increases every year. For example, we have seen an exponential growth in the sale of coconut water in the OECS member states. We know that the Caribbean region has tremendous potential to become a competitive actor on the global market. However, there are challenges in the industry that hinders our ability to compete. The Alliance for Action seeks to address these barriers by facilitating alliances among actors at every step of the coconut value chain. The hope is the revival of the industry will increase food availability and income of small-scale farmers through improved competitiveness of the coconut sector. Today, we are here to hold discussions on the standards for coconut products in the OECS countries. Our speakers, representatives of OECS National Bureau of Standards, will describe different services offered to manufacturers of coconut products, followed by an open discussion on the best practices and experiences of different stakeholders in the region. Thank you to the Bureau of Standards for being a part of this informative session. National Bureau of Standards conducting presentations today stem from Antigua and Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have over 200 participants from 27 countries who have registered for this event this morning. So we look forward to the rich discussions after each presentation. Once again, thank you very much for being a part of this important initiative. Back to you, Williams.
Thank you very much, Andrina. And thanks again, of course, to the OECS CBU unit for your kind support. You have been also very key to organize this session. Right now, we have 90 participants online, but as you mentioned, we have over 220 registrants all over the region. And we see in the chat already the Caribbean friendship, and people, yes, keep put in your comments and greetings in the chat. And of course, for any questions, you can also put them in the chat. And then after the presentations, we will have a Q&A session and open discussion, basically to share experiences, to share the best practices in not only in the OECS, but also in the Caribbean region overall. So thanks again for all the partners, for the donors, the European Union, the CARIFORUM Secretariat, the OECPS, for always supporting the Alliances for Action initiative in the Caribbean and also in the ACP region. So as Andrina pointed out, we will have 5 presentations from 5 bureau standards in the OECS region today. We will begin in an alphabetical order with the presentation of Ms. Jem Reynolds from the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards. Ms. Jem, can you please unmute your mic?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Let me also put your presentation, and I will be passing the slides. You just tell me when to go.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Ms. Simon, Mr. Rodriguez, fellow presenters and participants. So I am Jem Reynolds of the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards, and I am the manager for standards development at the Bureau. And my department facilitates the development and adoption of standards. Okay, next slide, please. So my presentation today will look at the standards and coconut products in Antigua and Barbuda, and we'll take the following order: a little background on the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards, a brief insight into the coconut industry in Antigua and Barbuda, a look at the coconut products, the available standards, technical regulations, and the current services being offered by the Bureau. Next slide, please. So the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards was established by the Standards Act, Cap 411, and is preserved and continued by Standards Act 2017. The Act is expected to be harmonized with the OECS Standards Act. Under this new Act, which is in keeping with the requirements under our WTO obligations, the Bureau provides for the preparation, promotion, implementation, and maintenance of standards, technical regulations, and conformity assessments related to quality infrastructure, activities in relation to goods, services, processes, and practices. Next slide. So the coconut industry in Antigua and Barbuda. Currently, the coconut industry is under rehabilitation. The major farms were destroyed by lethal yellowing disease, and since then, there has been no significant increase in farming. Presently, there is a local initiative to propagate coconuts, and this is being carried out by 2 of the agricultural stations here in Antigua. However, this initiative is mainly to supply plants for household use, not for farm use. Most of the coconuts being supplied to the market are imported from Dominica and Guyana. Okay, next slide. So you'll find when it comes to the coconut products, there are a few being made here in Antigua and Barbuda, and the main products you would find on the market are coconut oil and coconut butter, packaged coconut water, coconut milk, confectionery such as the sugar cake, and coconut flakes. We also have craft items where the coconut shells and leaves are used for crafts, such as the souvenirs, the hats, the baskets. And there are also soaps being made from coconut. And coconuts are widely used in meal preparation. So you find a lot of the local dishes, such as the dumplings and the buns, you get coconut being used there. Okay, the next slide, please. So there are a few standards which relate to coconut products, and these are all adoptions of the CARIFORUM Regional Standard. So we have a specification for coconut oil, and this specifies the requirements, methods of sampling and testing for coconut oil for both domestic and commercial use. We also have a specification for packaged natural coconut water, And this applies to the packaged coconut water you'd find on the shelf, such as the bottled coconut water. We also have a code of practice for packaged natural coconut water, and this gives recommendations for the hygienic preparation of the packed coconut water, including harvesting, processing, packaging, storing, transporting, and distributing of the coconut water. Currently, we have both these standards under revision. So the next one would be a code of practice, the general principles of food hygiene. And this gives principles of food hygiene from primary production all the way to the final consumer. We also have labeling of prepackaged goods. And this one applies to all the prepackaged foods to be offered to the consumer for catering purposes. And this standard is also currently under revision. Just keep in mind, these are all standards, and all of these standards are in themselves voluntary. So none of these are regulations, they're all currently standards. Next slide, please. When it comes to technical regulations, we recently, the following standards were recently made technical regulations. So you have the labeling of goods, which looks at the general requirements for labeling of all goods, and labeling of goods specific requirements for prepackaged goods. And this one looks at requirements for the information to be included on labels of goods prepackaged for sale. We are currently working with the different agencies to try and put in some form of implementation of these technical regulations. The next slide, please. So the services currently being offered to persons producing coconut products are mainly related to our labeling standards. So we find most persons who produce, well, coconut products will come in to find out what would be required for their labels. So we do label assessment, and this is usually offered to customers who purchase the labeling standard. So if you purchase the labeling standard, we do a free assessment for your label. So persons starting out their business usually inquire about these labels and give them that service. Some of our agro-processors have been trained on the information required when designing the labels for their products. And we've also worked with printing companies so that the information required on the label, when a customer comes to them or goes to them for designing their label, they know what is required and they can then advise the customer from that standpoint. The next slide, please. So in addition to the label assessment being done, we also offer food safety training. And this is usually done by request, or if it falls on the project, then we get in touch with a certified or qualified trainer to conduct this training. And currently, when it comes to certification for products or services, the Bureau does not offer that. However, we can make referrals to persons who are interested in having their products or service certified. Yeah, and we also work with the other agencies where we could provide any kind of assistance when it comes to any kind of product being offered. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And I guess at the end, I'll be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. It was excellent. Thank you again for that. Just as for the colleagues that just joined late to the meeting, please note that we will have a Q&A session in the end where we can have also an open discussions based on the presentations today. And of course, this webinar is the base for follow-up work that the Alliances for Action team will do in the Caribbean together with the partners of CARDI, the CIB, the OECS, and the ITC team. We tend to work with the processors and the farmers under the framework of the project to support the coconut industry in the Caribbean that is funded by the European Union. with the support from the CARIFORUM Secretariat and the OECS. So I see that now we have 110 participants online. So before we move to the next presentation, let me just launch a quick poll just to see, let's say, which group do you represent today? As we mentioned, we have over 220 participants that were registered to this webinar from more than 29 countries. But we also want to know if you are a farmer, if you are an agro-processor producing coconut products, if you work for the government, the Ministry of Agriculture, or if you are a professional providing services to the food industry in your country. So we have now the poll on. So if you can please select the group that you represent, and we will share the results in 15 seconds. Okay, so we see that we have a lot of policymaker colleagues working from the government, also from some participation for professional providing services to the food industry, and also 14% of agri-processors and 7% farmer and producers. So we welcome you, and I'm sure we're gonna have more participants join the session soon. Okay, then to continue with the presentations, let me please call the representative of the Bureau of Standards of Dominica, Ms. Karen Casimir. If you can please unmute your mic.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, participants. Good morning.
Okay, so let me just share my screen with your presentation. Okay, so please go ahead.
Okay, good morning again, everyone. I'm Ms. Karen Casimir, and I'll be presenting for the Dominica Bureau of Standards. At present, we have no standards in relation to coconut and coconut products specifically, but we do provide services in terms of maintenance of and development of the quality in coconuts and coconut byproducts. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll be giving a brief background on the Bureau of Standards, and then I will dive into the services that we provide, and then question and answer, as we said, will be after the presentations. Okay, in terms of background, the Dominica Bureau of Standards is Dominica's national standards body, and it is mandated by the Standard Act of number 4 of 1999. We are governed by a standards body and led by a director who at present is Mr. Median Larrock. Next slide, please. Okay, our functions include to promote and encourage the maintenance of standards for goods and services produced and used in Dominica. We also provide services in terms of processes and practices to ensure industrial efficiency and development, and we promote public and industrial welfare, health and safety, and for safeguarding the environment. The Dominica Bureau of Standards is charged with the responsibility for promulgating standards and standards-related activities, principally for enhancing and facilitating the island's market competitiveness. Services offered by the Bureau. So we offer services in terms of standards development. In terms of standards development, we facilitate the development of national standards. Standards are adopted in all sectors, including agriculture. Services are also offered to develop sectors and company standards. We coordinate Dominica's participation in regional and international standards development. We also offer standards for sale, and we're in the process of adopting a few of the cross-Q standards for coconut oil specifications, and then we'll also adopt the standard for coconut water when it is completed. We also offer services in terms of metrology. We do legal and a little industrial metrology, and the services offer verification of weighing devices, including scales, and we also do verification of gas pumps. and we are in the process of developing capacity for verification of weights, thermometers, and flow meters. In terms of standards compliance program, we offer label evaluation, and those are based on 2 of our national standards, DNS 2 Part 2 specification for labeling of prepackaged goods, and DNS 2 Part 3 specifications for the labeling of prepackaged foods. We also offer market surveillance, consignment inspection at the ports, and we do barcode generation. Next slide, please. Okay, we also offer laboratory testings. In terms of chemistry, we do chromatographic testings to test for purity. We also do shelf life, net content, pH, bricks, and we utilize standards from CROSS-Q, Codex, and WHO. In terms of biological testing, we could do yeast and mold testing, total plate counts, total coliform, salmonella testing, staphylococci, and those tests are also based on CROSS-Q, Codex, and WHO standards. We further activities. We do national nutritional facts in terms of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, and we also do organoleptic testing to include odor and color of the products. Product testing for coconuts. Some of the parameters we will be looking at will be for coconut oil, specific gravity, melting point, color, saponification, iodine value, unsaponifiable, acid value, insoluble purity, and for coconut water, we'll do the bricks, the pH, heavy metals, total coliform, total aerobic plates, and yeast and molds. Okay, we also offer certification services, and this we have a national farm certification scheme, and this scheme is part of the Fresh Produce Trade Enhancement Program, which is a pilot program aimed at improving the regional and national and international market competitiveness of fresh produce from the Commonwealth of Dominica. This program, it targets agricultural stakeholders for the certification of agricultural produce, farms, packing sheds, processes, and systems again, and we do that against international recognized standards such as Global GAP. This national program is in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture, ICA, and the Dominica Export-Import Agency. Next year. The benefit of this program, the National Certification Program, is that it provides assurance that the agricultural commodities are suitable for human consumption. It also ensures that the certified producer adhere to international best practices. It also enhances the competitive edge in the marketplace. It increases our farmers' earning by making markets more accessible, and it makes farms more accessible and affordable, makes farm certification more accessible and affordable. Next slide, please. In terms of the process for certification, our clients would contact us for information on the application. After this, the clients would submit an application form along with any other document that we request. A pre-assessment of the client's products, processes, or services to be certified is conducted to determine whether the client is ready to be audited or not. After this, if the client is ready, a contract is signed between the client and the NCD, the National Certification Division, and an auditor is assigned, is selected to conduct the audit, or an audit team. And the final assessment of the product, processes, or services is conducted by the audit team, and a date is scheduled for auditing. If the certification, according to certification, if the certification is approved, we grant a certificate, and we do annual reassessment of the farms or the product. If not, a grace period for non-conformity is identified and corrective actions are taken. If these corrective actions are not taken, we refuse certification. Next slide, please. In terms of good manufacturing practices, we have a scheme known as the GMP Recognition Certification Scheme, and we target all manufacturers and agro-processors supplying both the local and the foreign markets. This program involves the certification of products, processes, and it facilities and their management systems against recognized international standards and regulations. Two of the most common standards that are utilized are ISO 22000 for food safety management and ISO 22716 for cosmetic of good manufacturing practices of cosmetics. Next slide, please. We also do training. A few of the training includes training in good manufacturing practices and food safety. We do participation in standards development activities. We also do first aid training, food safety hygiene training, pesticide management training, and calibration training. These training are in collaboration with other partners such as the Ministry of Agriculture, Environmental Health, and the Fire and Ambulance Services. This brings us to the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Casimir. It was very, very interesting. And as you can see, there are many services that the colleagues in the Antigua, Barbuda, and Dominica offer for the agro-processors in the region. And of course, we look forward to continue the collaboration with the bureaus in Dominica and Antigua to support agro-processors supported by the alliances in the Caribbean. So excellent presentation. Thank you very much, Ms. Casimir. Next presenter will be our colleague from the, so again, for those who join later, we will have the Q&A and open discussion session in the end after the presentation from the bureaus in the OECS region. So next to present is the representative of the Bureau of Standards of Grenada, Mr. Robert Murford. So if you could please just unmute your mic, Mr. Medford. Hello, let me see. He's, hello, Mr. Medford, can you unmute your mic, please? It was working before, so it's Louis Law. Can you hear us? I see that your mic is unmuted. Well, just to take advantage of the time, maybe let's pass to the colleague from St. Lucia until we fix the connection issue of Mr. Medford. So, Ms. Joseph, are you able to unmute your mic?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, very good.
Okay.
So let me just,
okay,
yes, welcome Ms. Joseph, the representative of the Bureau of Standards of St. Lucia. Let me just put your presentation in the screen. Please, Ms. Joseph, over to you.
Okay, thank you, William, and thank you to the partners who've come and put this wonderful event together. It's actually very comforting to see we have an opportunity as bureaus within the OECS to speak to a targeted group of stakeholders about the work we do and what is available. I am Zamala Haynes. I am the head of the Standards Development Department at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards. And the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards is an organized, you could go to the next slide, please, William, thanks. So the SLBS is established as per the Standards Act number 14 of 1990. And the Act, like most of the legislation, gives a lot of the administrative requirements of the SLBS. But more importantly, it outlines what our mandate is. And we are really, like most of the other NSBs, about developing, maintaining, and promoting standards with the aim of improving goods or services, products and practices that are produced and used in St. Lucia. So that means the same standards apply for products being imported or even services being imported into St. Lucia. The overall aim is to protect our consumers, protect the health and safety of the consumers, and of course the environment. But we try to promote and ensure industrial efficiency, understanding that we're a developing country and we want to ensure that when we put standards in place, our local industry has an opportunity to be part of the global market. The SLBS over the past few years have been working towards strengthening our national quality infrastructure here in St. Lucia. And we as a organization are ISO 9001 certified. And it demonstrates that we're not just talking about standards, but we're also able to show that we are part and parcel and really apply standards. We have recently been accredited. Our metrology lab has recently been accredited for the calibration of weights between 1 milligram and 200 grams, as well as volume measures with a 20-liter capacity. And we were accredited to the ISO 17025. So again, demonstration of our ability to apply standards and not just promote and indicate that, hey, standards are available. The next slide, please. The St. Lucia Bureau of Standards has quite a few functions, and primarily is standards development at the core, where we work on developing national standards as well as developing our national position in international and regional standards forum. So we find ourselves, developing the products that all the other departments are using, because the standard is used by certification department in offering product and process certification. And I'll speak a lot more on that particular part of the SLBS's work. We also offer what is called a certificate of free sale, which demonstrates to potential importers that the products have been made here in St. Lucia. So that is a service specific for the local industry. It's also used for access to some markets, domestic markets. They would require a certificate of free sale for your product to be sold on their shelves. We do offer barcode generation, and agro-processors here in St. Lucia benefit from a reduced cost of barcode generation that is used for the lifetime of the product. And for some very small companies, if they don't have labels that they produce, but they just want that barcode to affix for sale in a supermarket, they can get the stickers of the barcode as well from us. And we have our various certification programs, primarily our beauty and wellness certification program, bakery certification, and we also offer HACCP, or hazard analysis critical control point recognition. Our metrology and compliance departments are like the police officers. They enforce the regulations of the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards, and that is in relation to standards being mandatory, as we would say in the past, but really standards having legislative jurisdiction where it is monitored actively, and there are fines that can be imposed for non-adherence to those standards. The metrology department is more specific to the weights and measures, and they also offer calibration services, as I indicated. But really, it's about ensuring that consumers get their value for their money, and as long as there's a unit of measurement assigned. Our information services, we have the opportunity to do research for potential clients, research with regards to standards, of course. So where there's no national standard existing, we would find out what regional or international or other country standards exist for use by potential clients. Very important is that this department handles our technical barriers to trade inquiry point. The TBT point is part of the World Trade Organization, WTO, and we manage, and you can, if you have a product, you want to know what is happening in another country, we would manage the notifications from St. Lucia for our conformity assessment measures, or when we have standards that are mandatory. And we can also conduct inquiries on behalf of potential exporters here in St. Lucia, so they know from the country they want to send the product to, what are the legal requirements, what standards exist, and they can be well informed and prepared to ensure you don't have rejection of your product when it gets to the point of entry. We also do sale of standards, of course, because standards is our main product, so we have to sell it. And from time to time, we do offer technical assistance regarding training, any other any other conformity or standardization related activities where we have the expertise, we can offer technical assistance. So sometimes we do assessments and audits for companies for their preparation as part of maybe an accredited certification body coming in. We would help them out. We also help companies establish quality management systems. As long as there's a standard existing, we can find a way to assist companies. And I just want to add that the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards has many affiliations. And next slide, please. And some of them are license agreements or memorandums of understanding and letters of agreement. But very important is we are full members of the International Organization of Standardization. And we are currently the only OECS country that has full membership. And that gives us the benefit of accessing over 30,000 additional standards. And it really benefits our industry that you have access to those standards. They can be adopted nationally. They can be purchased for you. We can give that access. We are part of the CrossQ, and CrossQ is the wider CARIFORUM network that deals with standards and quality. And we also have that benefit. And we sort of really are trying to continue promoting this regional harmonization and movement of goods and services through the CARIFORUM region. And we try to adopt all CrossQ standards. And if there's not an opportunity for identical adoption, we do modifications. So these are two very important alliances that I wanted to highlight, which shows and demonstrates that there's a lot of access for the coconut industry, even if there's no national standard that would exist. So specifically for the coconut industry, we do have quite a few standards, and I will just go through a few of these standards for you, but know that there are so many more standards available. So we have the next few slides, please. We have standards for grades of water nuts or fresh coconuts, and most of these standards are not including those for industrial processing. It's really standards for offering the product for sale. And we have standards for dry coconut, of course, because if we're doing the fresh nuts, then the dry coconut, which has so much more applications in terms of agro-processing, there are standards that sort of address the standard that is supplied in a deshelled and dehusked form, and not necessarily a whole coconut. We do have standards for the coconut oil, and this is a modification of the regional standard. And we do have standards for virgin coconut oil. And we sort of deviated a bit from the other Caribbean countries because we look at virgin coconut oil separately and give specific requirements for that commodity. And that's because of the market in St. Lucia, as well as the demand for specific virgin coconut oil from potential export markets like the French territories for us. So that drove the distinction in St. Lucia for these two standards. We have codes of practices for crops, and this is specific for the production of the tree, and it goes from primary production right up to harvesting. So it speaks to the farmers, it speaks to the environment, application of pesticides, everything to do with farm and crop management is found in that standard. And it's really applicable to any type or any size of agricultural farm. The code, of course, does not seek to provide all details. It is not very prescriptive, but really forms a guidance on the aspects of fresh food production. And we do have a growing agricultural certification program that is based on that standard, but it's not necessarily handled by the Bureau of Standards. The Ministry of Agriculture has their awarding of certificates and licenses based on that standard. And that's another thing for us. We do have a lot of collaboration with other ministries for the management of the standards and implementation and application. Standards under development, we are working with the CARIFORUM to update and revise the standard for packaged coconut water, and it's in the last stages at the CARIFORUM level, and that should become a national standard at least by July of this year. But the SLBS would have participated from the very inception of this regional project to ensure that our national concerns and views are addressed and expressed. And we should have those two packaged coconut water standards, and this doesn't really speak to the offering of the coconut water on the street, by the street side. And for that, we do have other standards, specifically the street vended food standards. We have codes of practice for fresh fruits and vegetables. Some other international standards that we've adopted here in St. Lucia includes prerequisite programs for food manufacturing, the ISO 22000 series that speaks to farming, the ISO 22000 standard as well that speaks to guideline for the application of a quality management system to crop production. Next slide, actually. So these are additional standards under the ISO 22000 umbrella that would speak to specific application. So it's not necessarily focused on coconuts, but what you find is in food manufacturing, there are standards that exist. In farming, there are standards that exist. And in crop production, there are standards that exist. And they can be applied to the specific commodity. We have, as I indicated, quite a number of standards that are available for testing that I did not really draw attention to, but you can rest assured that we do have a suite of standards. Nationally, we have about 600 standards adopted, and as indicated earlier, we do have opportunities for a further 30,000 through the various alliances that the SLBS has forged. I will take a few minutes just to spend on our certification possibilities. We at SLBS do offer product and process certification. Next slide, please. And for coconut producers, coconut product producers, coconut oil, for example, coconut water, bottled coconut water, any a product, at least that we do have a standard existing nationally, we can offer certification for that. So certification really is the written assurance. It says to the consumer, the purchaser, that the product, the material, the service, or even the practice or system that is being supplied fulfills or measures up to the requirements, next slide please, of relevant standards, regulations, and or specifications. For us at SLBS, we will be offering a third-party or independent verification type of certification because we're not involved in your business. We're coming in, we're doing the assessment, and we're giving you that certificate that says the SLBS would have reviewed and can assure your customers and purchasers that the product is meeting the requirements as outlined. And for us, product certification also includes service, and we also have process. And the two marks you see here are actually the marks that we offer. The standards mark is the one with the S that is given on the product, and the SLBS process certification is what you find with a lot of the practices like the bakeries, the beauty and wellness establishment, persons not necessarily offering a product, but it's about certifying the process that is being undertaken. And our certification process is very similar to Dominica. I think gave the example, and I will put in the chat a link on how to get some more information on our certification process. Next slide. But we are the only institution on island that operates a product certification scheme, and it is against the national standards and specifications that exist. And this is actually part of our legislation. It's incorporated in our regulations here in St. Lucia, and it's coordinated and managed by our certification department. We operate our certification programs in accordance with international standards on conformity assessment. And we currently are working towards being accredited to those international standards to demonstrate or become a full-fledged certification body. And that would demonstrate that we are committed to delivering the service of doing the validation, assessments, and auditing according to the ISO general requirements for bodies operating product certification systems. We generally have a simple process. You apply. Once the application is received and assessed, we do the assessment. We go in and we do product checks. So we go to your factory, but we also verify your product by doing tests against the standard and your company's specifications. We do the actual plant inspection. So we go into the factory, the farm, wherever it is. And once you satisfy the requirements, your certification would be granted. If it is the standards mark, it can be affixed to your product, your label, and various advertising media. If it is your process mark, there's no product to affix it to, but it can be displayed in your place of business, and you can use it in your various advertising, marketing, website, etc. We do a lot of post-certification checks, so surveillance. It doesn't end when you get that certificate. Remember, we're giving you that, we're giving your consumers that assurance, but we're not sitting in your business every day. And because of that, we do post-certification audits, assessments, and surveillance as well. But the use of the standard mark allows that evidence of conformance as per the standard. It gives evidence of a quality management system as well if one is attached. And it also says that you adhere to the terms and conditions of the certification license or agreement that we have. Some of the challenges that we face in terms of implementation, next slide, a lot of this is voluntary. Certification remains a voluntary program and it's at a cost. So persons sometimes find that it might be too cost prohibitive, but we try to work with our local producers and agro-processors to give them the value for their money. We understand too that if you're talking about export, standards is the definite tool that you have to use. Certification is that assurance that you're using that tool. And we just want to inform our producers and potential exporters that you really have to capitalize on those tools. So that is it for me. Let me thank you. You can contact us at the St. Lucia Bureau of Standards if you need more information. And I will also put in the chat how to get in touch with us if you need more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. It was a great presentation. Thank you for giving us a very good presentation on the services offered by the Bureau in St. Lucia, but also about stating the fact that the standards are there to protect the consumer, but also to guide the agro-processors also to comply with what are the regional or international standards. And we are sure most of the agro-processors in the region comply with all the standards, but also we are here to support with the Alliances for Action approach in the region. So thank you again, Ms. Joseph, and thanks again for the support. So just to restate, we will have 2 more presentations and then we will have a Q&A session and open discussion. Please note that the session is being recorded and we will upload the video in CARDI's YouTube channel. And then we will also send the presentation, the slides to the participants. So next, we have our colleague from the Bureau of Standards of Grenada, Mr. Robert Medford. Mr. Robert, are you able to unmute your mic?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, loud and clear.
Great.
Okay, let me just put your presentation on the screen. Okay. Please, Medford, over to you.
Thank you. And good morning, colleagues, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you. My presentation will specifically look at generally a background at the Bureau. We will look at the standards for the coconut industry, and then I'm just going to touch on a national quality infrastructure that is in place to support the coconut industry. Next slide, please. All right. Can you just click on the Bureau of Standards icon?
Yes, can you?
Go ahead.
Yes, can you see the slide on
Right,
the statement? Yes, go ahead. Okay, good.
Thank you. Right. The Grenada Bureau of Standards, we were established under the Standards Act of 1989. The Bureau is a body corporate within the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Consumer Affairs here in Grenada, and we are the leading institution for the establishment of the national quality infrastructure. Our mission, as stated, is improving the competitiveness of Grenadian industries through enhancing the quality of life of Grenadians through standardization. Next slide, please. The main roles of the Bureau, we are to prepare national standards and encourage standardization in commerce and trade. And to date, the Bureau has published over 200 national standards. In addition, we provide conformity assessment services, which includes inspection, testing, certification, in compliance with technical regulations for protection of the environment, occupational health and safety, and supporting our exporters and manufacturers. And to this regard, our analytical chemistry lab here at Grenada Bureau of Standards is ISO IEC 17025 accredited. Next slide, please. All right. With regards to standards for the coconut industry, we have the specification for coconut oil. This is GDS 16 of 1997. It is an identical adoption of the 1992 CARIFORUM standard in the same name. Currently, there is a revised version of this standard that will be in 2017. And once it is confirmed, the Grenada Bureau of Standards will adopt that particular standard. The standard, basically the scope entails, this standard prescribes the requirements for the methods of sampling and tests for coconut oil intended for edible and industrial use at the commercial level. The current status of the standard is voluntary, and we did a demand for the standard as of November 2020, and the demand we found was very low. Next standard, please. Next slide, please. We also have GDS 118 of 2014, and this is the code of practice for packaged natural coconut water. Again, this is an identical adoption of the CARIFORUM standard CRP 2 of 2010. There is a revised version of this standard, which is now in its final stage. Once it is completed, we will also move to adoption of the standard. The scope, the code of practice sets out the recommendations for hygienic preparation of packaged natural coconut water, including harvesting, processing, packaging, storing, transporting, and distributing. Status of the standard is voluntary. We also did a demand as of November 2020, and it's very low also. Next slide, please. We have GDS 119 of 2014, specification for packaged natural coconut water. Again, it's an identical adoption of the CARIFORUM standard. The revised version of the standard in its final stage, and we will move to adoption once it is complete. And this standards apply to packaged natural coconut water. As defined in clause 3, which is offered for consumption. It only applies to coconut water which has been packaged in its natural state without the use of additives. Again, the status of the standard is voluntary, and the demand is also very low. Next slide, please. We have the GDS 3 Part 1 of 2011, Code of Practice, General Principles of Food Hygiene. Again, it's an identical adoption of the CARIFORUM standard, CRCP 5 of 2010. And this standard, the scope, this code of practice details the essential principles of food hygiene within the food chain from primary production to final consumer, stipulating the acceptable hygienic conditions for the producing of food that is safe and suitable for consumption. Status of the standard is also voluntary, and the demand for this standard is actually low. Next slide, please. We also have GDS 1 Part 4 of 2018, and this is the specification for the labeling of prepackaged foods. Again, it's an identical adoption of the CARIFORUM standards, CRS 5 of 2010. The standard applies to the labeling of all prepackaged foods to be offered to the consumer or for catering purposes. The adoption of this standard is actually compulsory mandatory. It is a technical regulation here in Grenada, and the demand for the standard is moderate. We also have the standard for prepackaged goods that is under development. We will move to adoption also when that one is also completed. Next slide, please. I will just now touch on the national quality infrastructure. When we speak of the national quality infrastructure, we speak of the pillars that comprises standards, metrology, conformity assessment, and conformity assessment has under its umbrella inspection, testing, and certification, accreditation, and awareness. The Grenada Bureau of Standards, as I indicated earlier, is the leading institution in the development of the national quality infrastructure for Grenada. In 2019, we undertook the development of a national quality policy that was completed, but due to COVID, it was not yet officially published. But this year, we're looking to the official publication of the national quality policy. With regards to standards, as I indicated before, we have published over 200 national standards in several areas. In addition to cater for the person selling on the side of the street, we have a standard for street vended foods. Our metrology laboratory offers services in mass, volume, temperature, legal metrology. We're now moving to other services in that we'll be expanding our infrastructure, and nutritional analysis will become one of the services we would be offering. In terms of conformity assessment, we have several programs that we execute. In terms of accreditation, as I said before, our analytical chemistry lab is ISO 17025 accredited, and we're always continuing to build awareness. Our laboratories, as it speaks specifically to coconut products, we can provide testing services for the physiological and microbiological limits for coconut water, and we can conduct some of the analysis for coconut oil. In addition, we can conduct heavy metal analysis. So we do have a testing program or testing infrastructure in place to support the coconut industry. It is very important to note, you can have the standards, you can have them published, but if you don't have the infrastructure to support the implementation of the standards, then the standards will not have the desired effect. So it is very important that the infrastructure is in place, and that includes your inspection programs, your testing programs, your accreditation, certification programs are very important. We're raising awareness that the standards exist and encouraging our stakeholders to use the standards. Yes, it is voluntary, so we have to do a lot of encouragement to the stakeholders. In addition, we provide food safety auditing and training services, and we do have an active program for the certification of our labels. As I indicated, that the labeling standard for prepackaged food is compulsory. In addition, the labeling standard for prepackaged goods is compulsory. I must say that the majority of the labeling standards here in Grenada are compulsory. So we do have an active certification program for labels. Our supermarkets are on board, because once you want to display your product in the supermarket, they usually ask you to produce that certificate of certification or certificate of compliance for your labels. In addition, we also provide barcodes for our small manufacturers, and we also work with printing agencies to ensure that they understand the requirements of the relevant standards. Next slide, please. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Medford. Very interesting and very important the point that you highlight on the labels. It's not only the content of the product, but also the outside, the packaging that is very important for the consumer as well, and important for the agro-processors to comply with these requirements. So thank you again, Mr. Medford. So last but not least, we have the presentation from our colleagues from St. Vincent, Mr. Ledger. So this will be the last presentation for the day. After this presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session and an open discussion. If you would like if you want to raise any challenges or any opportunities or lessons learned that you have experienced within your own countries, we very much encourage the discussion. So now, Mr. Ledger, could you please unmute your mic? Okay, very good. So, of course, last but not least, again, we thank you all. We thank you all very much. All the partners involved in this, in the presentations, to make available this event. So we really thank you for all your support. So now let me please share the presentation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I hope you can see it. And please, over to you, Mr. Ledger.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much, William. Good morning to my colleagues from the National Bureau of Standards in the OECS, of course, to other stakeholder participants. It's a privilege to make a presentation on behalf of the Bureau of Standards relative to the standards for coconut in our region. Seems like my task is a little easier than my colleagues, my further colleagues, because as part of the OECS, most of our standard infrastructure and the standards that we have are very similar. So I will not go into details as to the particular standards. So I will basically just highlight a few issues. So as mentioned, my name is Ezra Ledger from the Bureau of Standards. And as you're aware, the Bureau of Standards is a legal entity in St. Vincent and Grenadines. It was established by an Act of Parliament. And of course, we are presently under the operation of the Ministry of Agriculture. We have started a responsibility for the quality of goods. If you can go to the next slide, please. The quality of goods and subject to trade in St. Vincent and Grenadines. And of course, as mentioned by the other colleagues, we are the only national entity that is charged with the declaration of national standards. Supplementary to this Standard Act, we also administer the Metrology Act, which is the weighted measure. And that act gives us the responsibility for the regulating of all weighing and measuring devices that are used for trade in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Next slide, please. Like most of my colleagues, again, we have a very similar mission. Our purpose is to enhance the quality of life for Vincentian and to promote quality competitiveness by ensuring that all goods and services that are produced and are used in St. Vincent and Grenadines are of consistently acceptable standard of quality. And based on this vision and our purpose, we still, as a developing institution, even though we have been around for a while, our vision is to be recognized by the Vincentian and international community as the authority responsible for the creation and maintenance of an environment of standards, quality assurance, and metrology in St. Vincent and Grenadines. That is, we are trying our best to have a very credible and recognized national quality infrastructure. Next slide, please. So based on our legislation and our policy of government, our main function is to prepare and promote standards relating to basically everything: goods, services, processes, and practices. We ensure industrial efficiency, we assist industrial development, we promote public and industrial welfare, health, safety. We safeguard against negative impact to the environment, as well as we carry out conformity assessment activities as per those standards have been declared. Next slide. And specifically to the Metrology Act, we provide metrological services, verification, calibration of weighing and measuring devices used for trade. Presently, we do scales, retail scales, we do service station gas pumps, and we are presently developing capacity for temperature and pressure. In addition to our regulatory mandate, we provide national technical assistance to stakeholders in meeting the applicable standard. And collaboration with the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, we handle consumer complaint relating to national standards. So we do have a very extended mandate in addition to overseeing several of the other national legislation that has been passed. For instance, we are part of the responsible entity for the implementation of the National Occupational Health and Safety legislation. We are championing research and development into the medicinal cannabis industry. And we are presently now doing the establishment of other research and development and standards related issue for a modern medicinal industry, which will basically take into consideration other fresh produce such as ginger, turmeric, moringa, mushrooms, and other products. So we really have a wide scope responsibility, and all of these are really subject towards enhancing quality of life for Vincentian, as well as to promote competitiveness in trade. Okay, so if you can go to the next slide, please. Like my colleagues in the sister NSBs, our services are relative to our national quality infrastructure. The pillars are very similar: standardization, conformity assessment. We do not offer the full slate of conformity assessment activity. As my colleague director, Mr. Murford, mentioned, we do have the standards, but one of our main challenges is that we don't have the infrastructure for all of our conformity assessment in terms of the testing. So for conformity assessment, we do some testing. We do have a microbiological and basic chemistry lab, with principally their food and water related testing. Our inspection services will based principally on one of our standards, which is the GMP, good manufacturing practices. And our certification somewhat is really a label certification that is offered to products that meet the standards for labeling. And I'll mention that subsequently. We always speak about metrology, where we provide all of the verification, calibration for the legal and industrial sector, and provide provision of technical assistance to most of our stakeholders relative to standards concern. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, and I'll go into the middle part. Okay, so we can yes. So we have a few standards related to the coconut industry, and most of these standards were adopted from CROSQ or CARIFORUM standard. The first one, however, which is the specification for dry coconut, this is a very old standard, been developed as part of an OECS initiative in concert with CARDI and AICA. So this standard has been declared and is not much very relevant, because most of the trade in coconut is not that formalized. However, the standard for coconut oil, which is SVGNS 45, this is something that we're hoping to revise, because we have seen the dynamics of the coconut oil industry in St. Vincent and Grenadines. Matter of fact, we did have a coconut industry in St. Vincent and Grenadines, but it's no longer in existence. But we have seen a resurgence of the production of coconut oil. So we're hoping to revise the standard subsequently, so as to make it more captive to today's reality. The other two standards mentioned the code of practice for natural coconut water, which is standard 53 and 54 for the specification. These two standards are adopted and in use, and we have been using these as tools to train our local stakeholders. As most of you may be aware, that these two standards are presently being reviewed. As a matter of fact, have been reviewed and presently at the point of being approved at CROSQ level, which should be subsequently sent to the COTED for approval. And of course, once these standards are approved at the regional level, then St. Vincent and Grenadines, as a member of CROSQ, will subsequently adopt these as national standards. So those will be a revision of the code of practice for packaged water and the specification for natural packaged water. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so these are some related standards. They are not specific, but they generally capture the cover the ambit of the coconut industry. For instance, one of our most popular standards is the requirement for labeling prepackaged food, which is our National Standard Number 1, Part 3, revised in 2010. And this will cover the requirement for all pre-packaged food, and coconut, whether it's the oil, the water, or the confectionaries, should have to comply with this particular standard. We also have our Code of Practice, which is General Principle of Food Hygiene. This is what we call our benchmark, our GMP standards. So all food establishments will have to comply with this code. And of course, we offer inspection and technical services. We offer, of course, certification service for this particular standard as well. So if those premises or establishment or production facility that comply with this standard could be afforded certificate of compliance with this particular code of practice. We also have a code of good agriculture practice gap for fresh produce, and recognize that coconut falls within this ambit. As my colleague, Ms. Haynes, mentioned in her presentation, that this is a generic standard that covers all agricultural produce. It's not specific to the coconut industry, but it can capture sufficiently the major requirement for good agricultural practices. What we have seen over the years as well is that we have seen a lot of claims being made on coconut and coconut product. While we are aware that some of these claims may be true, we want to ensure that there's not any deceptive practices in this particular industry. It's a resurgent industry, and we know all of the functional benefit, the traditional and cultural benefit of coconut and its product. So we have adopted a suite of standards, principally from the Codex Alimentarius, to deal with claims. So we have, one of them is the Guideline for Use of Nutritional and Health Claim on Labels. So there are a few others that I didn't mention here, but these were specific to capture the deceptive practices. Another that we have put in place is the Code of Practice for Organic Product Production and Processing. Again, we have seen that persons are referring to their product as organically grown or organically produced. And these are a marketing tool for competitive edge. And we have to be mindful that, persons, without having a standard or best practice to adhere to, that may make these claims to have a competitive edge on the product. So this standard for the Code of Practice exists, as well as for those persons who are selling their product on the street. We also have a code of practice for street vended food, which has been adopted as well from the Codex Alimentarius. So all in all, these standards address sufficiently the stakeholders in the coconut industry. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so we can bypass these because these are basically the scope for all of the standards I just mentioned a while ago. So we can bypass these. I'll probably just go to the slide on the process and recommendation. Right, so obviously, like the other NSBs in the region, we offer service based on our quality infrastructure. So as I said, our principal function is standardization. So we prepare standardization in concert with the national stakeholders, our regional stakeholders, and of course our international partners. The output of those are national standards, which of course are offered for sale. We also have product verification and certification. So we assist with the label assessment to ensure that it can, meet the national standard. We also provide a lot of GAP and GMP inspection and other technical support to all the related stakeholders to ensure that they can consistently meet either the code of practice or applicable standards. And we have capacity for product testing, principally microbe for food and water. We are presently doing some upgrade to our facilities. So hopefully by July, we will be expanding our capacity for additional testing, and those will be broadcast on our website. And we also implementing at the moment national certification system, which will capture all applicable standards as subject for trade. So those systems should be in place again, hopefully by August, because we're now putting in place all of the necessary requisition so as to ensure that we can have a system that is compatible with what exists in the region and abroad. So basically, that is what we have to offer, and I just probably give some communication address. So those of you may wish to communicate with us, this is our communication address, and I want to thank you very much for your patience and allowing me to make this brief presentation. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ledger. And as you mentioned, it's very important that the claims that we make of a product, whether we say it's organic, is it fair trade, is it ethical, it follows some certain standards that are in place in the country, and it's good that they have your institution there to support the agro-processors in St. Vincent. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you all of our colleagues who have made the presentation. Of course, so now, for those of you who join later, we had the presentations of 5 bureau standards in the region. So thank you for the bureau of Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So now we move to the session of question and answers, open discussions, any experiences that you would like to share. As we said at the beginning, we have participants from all over the Caribbean. We have actually more than 28 countries that have registered to these webinars, not only the OECS, even though there is a particular focus on the OECS country in this session. All of you have mentioned that now the code of practice for the bottled coconut water is on discussion at the cross-Q level. This is also another topic that the Alliances for Action project in the Caribbean with CARDI, OECS, the CIB, with the funding from the European Union, the support from the CARIFORUM Secretariat and the OECPS, we're going also to keep promoting, keep raising the awareness of this standard within the region, and also work in alliances to work with the agro-processors and farmer organizations and farmers to actually comply with the standards and understand it and be able to offer, let's say, good products to the consumers in the region and internationally for exports. So so we would encourage you to, if you want to make an intervention, please click the raise hand in the button in the Zoom, or also please make your question in the chat, and we will be reading aloud. My colleague Leora has been taking the question, so I will begin handing out to her for the first question that you have made to the presenter. So please, Leora, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, William, and thank you to the speakers for these great presentations. So we have 2 questions. The first one is addressed to all speakers, and it comes from Dr. Govind Sipersad from Trinidad and Tobago. So he's asking if the standards address the use of the coconut as it relates to water and oil when there is an alteration of the products. For example, how much water can be added to coconut water and still call it coconut water? Or for instance, if a percentage of palm oil or soya bean oil is added to the coconut oil, can it still be called coconut oil?
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
And this also relates to the standard that we're discussing now at the cross-Q level. So this was a question addressed to all the colleagues. So who would like to take this first question? We would encourage our colleagues or anyone that would like also to make the comment, please click the raise hand button and we will unmute your mic.
William, if I may, this is
Yes, please.
Samara from St. Lucia. These standards speak to the products in their natural state, unadulterated, and that means no water, additional water added. Specifically, the packaged coconut water standard is actually for packaged natural coconut water. The coconut oil standard also gives very detailed coconuts and the defining quantities that would be needed so the products can be declared and coconut oil. So these standards are very specific to the commodity, and it gives means of testing and analysis to establish its properties. So I don't think they allow for much adulteration or addition of other types of commodities, and still allow declaration as natural coconut water or coconut oil.
Great. Thank you very much.
William?
Yes,
William?
go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks again. And I just want to concur with my colleague. Yes, the standards for unadulterated product, the one for natural coconut water is natural. It does not allow for mix or blend. And this is why I remember when the standards were being prepared, this was one of the intention of the standard, to avoid this adulteration, because we recognize that persons in preparing the coconut water were adding, water, and some persons even adding some glucose to the product as well. So it was really to capture this particular concern, because standards, we have to ensure that quality and fitness for use. So generally, the standard for coconut water should be unadulterated, no blend. Equally for the coconut oil and other products, because these are products that are specific to the commodity. They are single ingredient commodity, and therefore the coconut oil, as my colleague mentioned, is unadulterated. There will be a standard for blended oils, for mixture of oil, but coconut oil should be natural coconut oil as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for the clarification.
William,
yes.
I have a comment also.
Yes, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Right. I concur with my two colleagues, and it also stressed the importance, as I said, of having the infrastructure to support these standards. So when you have these adulterations taking place, it is critically important that the infrastructure is in place to detect such, because the standards are very specific with particular parameters, and any change to those parameters or significant change to those parameters can indicate an adulteration of the product. So having the testing infrastructure in place, having qualified and competent people to carry out the test in place is absolutely critical to safeguard against these types of practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And let's say, working with the processors in the countries, we have also received this complaint that sometimes they call coconut oil to some product that is meets also virgin coconut oil when there is, or extra virgin coconut oil when there's making the reference to the olive oil when there is actually not extra virgin coconut oil. So it's important that we have all this information clear for all the stakeholders within the region. So thank you very much for your comments.
So there is a second question from Reginald Andal, I think from Grenada, and he's addressing this question to Mr. Robert Medford. He would like to know what is needed by the Grenada Bureau to have greater adoption by processors of the appropriate standard for fresh packaged coconut water.
Okay, Mr. Medford, yes, you want to take it? Yes.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Andal, for your question, and it's a very, very, very good question. So I will go to some extremes. First, to have more persons adopt the standard, obviously we would need to have more awareness of the standard amongst the industry and the benefits of the standards to the industry. That is one mechanism that can be employed. A second mechanism can be employed if now these standards are incorporated into some form of legislation to regulate and control the industry. So for example, if you have a licensing program for all the persons engaged in the sale of packaged coconut water, you can have as a condition that their product need to comply with the relevant standard. In addition, if we have the necessary export markets that we are going to be supplying our products to, then the market can drive adoption or use of the standard by the industry. Very importantly, our consumer base can drive the industry also. So if the consumer starts saying, hey, listen, we need some evidence or some thing in some form of fashion, just saying, okay, your product has complied to these standards that are in place. And if you have a big enough consumer grouping demanding such, then that can lead to more adoption. And in addition, one other thing that can work is if you have an incentive program to the industry to encourage the adoption and use of these standards. Because the gentleman at the side of the road, once he's not seeing the benefit to him, he may choose not to. But if he has some incentive to do it, then the industry can go forward. So those things can increase the adoption and use of the standards by persons in the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medford. This is very important. And of course, I'm sure we can join forces in Grenada with CARDI, with the Bureau, with the ITC, and also other partners important in the country to raise this awareness that is needed for the sector. So, Leora, before we go to the next question, maybe I see a hand up of Masani de Freitas, so I'm gonna unmute your mic. So if you can please. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for St. Vincent. I noticed that St. Lucia has technical assistance for people and they train them, and they also do research to make sure that the exporting product is properly labeled. I want to know if St. Vincent assists the local vendors in technical, making sure that the product is quality, and do they help them with labeling. And Grenada also provide barcode to assist small business. I would like to know what St. Vincent does to assist small businesses using coconut product.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freitas. Mr. Ledger, do you want to take this question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Freitas. Yes, maybe in my presentation, I was trying to be a bit brief, see that my colleagues have mentioned a similar platform. But over the years, the Bureau of Standards and Ingredients have been working, we are really processors. We have been working, consulting with most of our processors in all areas. As a matter of fact, 2 years ago, we would have implemented an FAA project specifically for coconut water in St. Vincent and Grenadines. We would have done training and other technical assistance for a lot of the coconut water producers. So that's part of it. We also provide and request, so if we encourage our stakeholders to visit us or to make a call to our department and to make a particular request. So we do provide technical assistance for whether it's for the specificity of the standard in question, or it can be the good agricultural practices or the good manufacturing practices, or any other applicable assistance that we can offer. So we do work along with our stakeholders once they request our service. We also provide, the verification of labels. So if you have your labels, we do that. We can do some laboratory tests on the products, and like they say, we also offer to our small processors, once you want a label certificate, you can also benefit from barcode as well. So we do issue barcode as well. So the option is to visit our offices or go to our website. You could download a request form and you can send the request into us, and we'll follow. So we have not been as aggressive for the part over the year because of the COVID. So we are more or less trying to have a great online presence in meeting our customer demand. So thank you again for your question. I hope that that would have sufficed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ledger. Just to continue with St. Vincent, I see that we have Matthew Stanton with the hands up. He is the chairperson of the Coconut National Stakeholder Platform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So, Mr. Nanton, yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, I just like to strengthen what Mr. Ledger speak about. We were supposed to extend to the vendors on the street some help for this year, but the COVID and the volcano eruption, it's kind of put us on a backbench, but we have already had some discussion through the chairpersons and some of the members for the NSP to get active on helping these people throughout the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Nanton. So Lira, now I'll hand over to you in case we have any questions from the chat. And then I continue with Trisha Webb. I see her hand up.
Okay, so there are other questions. So Jensen Williams is asking something about the quality. He said that in order for these various standards to be in place, is there a need to have a state-of-the-art laboratory to have ongoing testing, not only for the safety, but also for the quality?
Interesting. There was some comments on the infrastructure. So any of the colleagues from the bureaus would like to discuss about this? State-of-the-art laboratories, are they needed to comply with standards? Who would like to take this this question?
Yes, Mr. Medford here.
Go ahead, sir. Yes.
It's a very good question again. As I indicated, yes, you need the appropriate infrastructure to support the standards. Looking at the cost, it now depends on the parameters of what you want to test. Some are costly, some are not. If you look at the standard for coconut water, for example, you have items, parameters such as pH and Brix, which is relatively inexpensive. But then when you go to coconut oil and you look like the iodine value and some of the other things, it might be a bit costly. So you have to now look at demand against the demand for it, and is it sustainable? If the economy of scale in a country is too small, then looking at having it done externally, or if the region comes together and they have one point, for example, where the demand is great and that service can be offered to other economies, then that is fine. So it now comes back to an examination of what is happening in country. Is the demand great to sustain the investment in the infrastructure? Or is there someone regionally that we can partner with to have these things done? So that is the approach I would take.
Okay, as well, if I may add to my colleague Medford. Well, I don't know, Medford, I didn't have my camera on, but you'll see my notes. Because I had the same issue in terms of, you know, in developing laboratory capacity, we have to look at, you know, the demand. Is there sustained demand for the service, or it is just something that is, you know, periodic? And, you know, laboratory infrastructure are very costly, and the technology, you know, changes rapidly. So we may invest in a laboratory, they say within 3 years, the technology is somewhat obsolete. And hence, if there's not a sustained demand for the service, then it will be, you know, not very economical for us to have infrastructure waiting. We know that the quality infrastructure lab is quite important for all, you know, testing for food product, especially because we have to validate fitness for use, safety, quality, and above all, you know, what regulators put in place is really for safety and fitness for use. Quality parameter sometimes becomes relative. So what we normally champion, you know, as a supplementary to having, you know, been testing frequent, is to ensure that we have quality systems throughout the value chain. So we have to ensure that we have good agricultural practices. So we have to ensure that, you know, the farmers who are growing these commodities, so handling them or transporting them, that they implement, you know, the good agricultural practices throughout the value chain. Within the processing of these products. So one time we have to ensure that the good manufacturing practices, you know, throughout are adhered to. So it really mitigate against some of the condition that may impair the quality of the product. I'm not saying we shouldn't test. Yes, we should test. But if in lieu of that, we need to have a complementary system so as to safeguard the quality of our product. And yes, we are hoping to put in place infrastructure for testing, but that Medford mentioned that the cost of some of the microbiological testing, the chemical testing, and quite costly. And if that cost will have to be translated to the producers, and would be able to afford paying for every batch that have been tested, that have been supplied. So those are the balances that we have to look at when we are implementing some of these systems. Thanks very much for the question.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up to those answers, so thank you for that. I received a private message with another question asking, can adulteration be detectable in the lab? If some products have been changed or modified, can this be detected in the lab?
Well, yes, for the water, it can be for because there are certain parameters, the bricks, and other parameters, the conductivity. All these are the variable with the water, so they can be detected. The oil as well can be detected, because we realize that the oil, they have different we call it values that we can validate. So yes, science has caused us to be very, very specific in terms of traceability. So that is something that can be done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ledger. Ms. Sarmala, if you want to, please unmute your mic if you would like to intervene.
Okay, thank you again, William.
Of course.
I just wanted to add to what my two colleagues from Grenada and St. Vincent said. Standards and standardization, even quality infrastructure, is based on science, and testing is a very key pillar of that. And it remains a regional, and when I say regional, I'm speaking about us here in the OECS, it remains an issue for us having access to testing facilities. And if, when we do have facilities, then the next part comes is accredited. Here in St. Lucia, we recently opened up a national diagnostic facility that is aimed and targeted specifically for agro-processing. It's relatively new, just starting up, so the testing capabilities are still very limited, but there is at least some hope in terms of access to doing a lot of the laboratory analysis. I was very happy to hear Dominica's presentation, in fact, and the amount of laboratory analysis that they have the capability to do, and that is very reassuring. And I think I saw in the chat where somebody said we typically try Jamaica and Trinidad. The challenge in access to those test facilities is the nature of the product. Some of these products need to be stored at a certain temperature to get to where it needs to. Some of them, the shelf life is very volatile, so you don't want to have it to maybe go to a Miami, for example. So if, this is something I don't think that even bureaus can really help solve on their own, because it's about some sort of real capital investment in building our quality infrastructure, and the testing facilities being key. But I just want to say to those industry persons here in St. Lucia that there is some amount of assistance given through the National Diagnostic Facility. I don't know if they're taking external clients as yet, so I cannot speak to whether that plea is for everybody in the region, yes. But at least we have some hope, and really it's something that as countries, as OECS, we have to see how we build our quality infrastructure even better, specifically for testing.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mana. This is also the objective of this type of events. So there is also this regional integration, that if there is a service that is offered in Dominica, but maybe not in St. Lucia, we can have this type of collaboration between the region. So we had the intention to end the seminar at 11:30, but we see there is still some questions. So if you don't mind to stay with us a bit longer. So now I'm gonna hand over to Ms. Trisha Webb. I see she has her hand up. So Ms. Webb, if you can unmute your mic. Thank you. Great.
Hi, good day, everyone. I'm located in Antigua and Barbuda, and I'm an agro processor for coconut oil and its derivatives. And I've been searching for some time now to get nutritional facts done, quality testing, etc. And I've been in touch with CARIFORUM because in Antigua, the lab does none of those testings. And I just wanted to say it's good to know that nearby countries like Dominica, St. Lucia, etc., does it as well. And I don't know how much it costs. Like I heard one of the co-hosts saying that because of the types of testing, it proves expensive. But if I can get some contact details for these different entities, that would be amazing and very helpful.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webb. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, the idea of this session is that the first objective is to raise the awareness for this type of information that they reach the agro-processors in the region and the farmers, and then of course there will be follow-up work by CARDI and by the ITC with all of the partners like the OECS or the different bureaus to support the agro-processing companies in the region to adopt and apply the standards, including also all these testing that are also very, very important in terms of the labeling, for example, in terms of the informing the consumer about the products. So definitely we will follow up with you after this event. And this is the idea that we will do it across the region.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me ask my colleague Liora if there have been any question in the chat that I have missed.
Yes, so I'm going to combine some because they are similar. Okay. So Mrs. Alicia Lett and Mr. Nigel Durand are asking if there is a plan to introduce a standards for infused oil or flavored coconut water and coconut powder or coconut flour.
Okay, thank you very much. If any of the colleagues from the Bureau would like to take the floor. We have also colleagues from CrossQ also registered in the event and also participating. I don't know if they're still online who can also address this question. If you can raise your hand, it would be great. Or any of the colleagues on the standards? Yes, Mr. Legge, go ahead.
Yes, thanks again. Another very good question. Yes, so yeah, in lieu of specificity of standard, because it's you've realized that standard, could be specific or they could be, very general capturing. And so the two question was basically about standard for composite flour from coconut, and then the infused oil. So basically what happens that these products are still considered as food. And when there is not an applicable standard for the specific product or commodity, then we tend to use the generic standard. So for instance, the labeling of prepackaged food will cover these particular standard. And of course, within it, it will indicate what will be the specificity of the standard, the list of ingredients, and with their proportion. And of course, the standard is geared towards deceptive practices, providing truthful information. So the standards are in no way trying to prevent, what we call persons using, adding value to the product, which is good. So at the moment, we do not have a standard for infused oil, but the generic standards and the generic code of practice will cover the processes, the product, the process, and the practice for these particular standards. So it's just a matter of still walking along with the Bureau of the Standard to ensure that, the information or the products are produced, are prepared, are processed within, the same good hygienic environment, and that the information that is placed on the label are correct relative to the product.
Thank you, Mr. Ledger. So I'm gonna take one more question for Ms. Hilary Gabriel, who has her hand up. So I'm gonna please ask you to unmute your mic. Can you please? Yes, go ahead, please. I see you muted your mic, but we cannot hear you. Sorry, it seems that we cannot hear you, Ms. Gerbio. Sorry for that. Yora, so then can we take one more question from the chat and then we begin to close the session?
Yes, William. So Mrs. Tessa Bolland is asking if there is a complaints procedure at the various bureaus if someone has purchased bottled coconut water, which they believe or she believes is diluted.
Yes, thank you very much. Very important one. Yes, Ms. Ledger, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, well, yes, and I did mention that part of our service is that we work along with the Consumer Affairs Division. So once there is, and it's a very good question, and something one of our, and I think somebody asked a question earlier about the PR, but one of the way that we normally promote is that the more complaint we receive, we want persons, because the bureaus of standards, while we have an inspectorate that do surveillance and monitoring, may have just 3 or 4 persons covering an entire population. And if we are to inform consumers that yes, in purchasing, to read the labels, to be vigilant about the product they purchase, and any sort of non-compliance that they see, they can report to us, then we'll have more targeted intervention. So yes, we do have a complaint mechanism. We handle our consumer affairs, consumer complaint in consult with the Ministry of Health, the Public Health Department, as well as the Trade and Consumer Affairs Division. And yes, once persons have this complaint, they can lodge them at either of, any of these 3 entities in St. Vincent and Grenadines. So you can inform the Bureau of Standards or inform the Consumer Affairs Division, and we will follow up with those complaints and investigate them within a very short period of time, especially when it has to do with health. If the product is found to be, non-compliant, there are series of action that we can take. If it's something that is critical, of course, we'll have that product withdrawn from trade. If it's an issue that could be corrected, we work with the processor to have the issue corrected. So there are different measures depending on the specificity of the complaint. But we do have something in place, and I know, I can't speak for all the bureaus, but I know it's something that is part of our regulation. All of our regulations are very similar in OECS, so we have that responsibility as well. So thanks very much for the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Legend. So it's important, as you stated, to work in alliances also with other institutions within the country, such as the Ministry of Health and the institutions protecting the consumer. So it's very important to work together towards that goal. So thank you very much for that. So we are going to begin now closing the seminar. Before we do that, please, we're going to be launching a feedback form. So if you can please tell us how did we do today. If you would like us to do more events like these ones, we will be happy to take your feedback. Also, of course, the questions that we didn't have the time to respond today, we are going to follow up with you. I mean, by email, and also please feel free to contact any of the institutions part of the Alliances for Action Network in the Caribbean. In particular, the OECS Competitive Business Unit, the Secretariat, the CARDI, the CIB, and the other important national and regional partners in the Caribbean. So thank you very much again for other presenters. Thank you very much to each of the bureaus that were able to make the presentation today. As we mentioned, this session is being recorded, so it will be uploaded in CARDI's YouTube channel. So before we close, I'm gonna give the word to my colleague, Mr. Tristan Alvarez from CARDI, just to say a few words to say goodbye to all and to thank all of our donors and partners who made possible this event. So Tristan, do you wanna unmute your mic, please?
Okay, sure. All right, so I assume while we continue completing the feedback form, I will basically give a vote of thanks, as it will. I won't keep my video on all through. This is to conserve bandwidth, but I have it on now so you can just see my face. So the name is Tristan Alvarez. I'm the Deputy Program Manager for Resource Mobilization at CARDI, and I'm also the project coordinator for this coconut project phase 2 on behalf of CARDI as well. Okay, so I'll stop my video here and allow me to extend all protocols and also allow me to express the sentiments of my executive director, Mr. Barton Clark. He would have liked to be present, but he had to address a personal matter. However, his intention, I would say, is demonstrable of the commitment of CARDI to the development of the agriculture sector and food industry, such as the given focus of coconuts at today's webinar. So I was able to sit through this webinar, and I believe it would have touched on arguably 3 dimensions, if I could be so broad, those being the public health dimension. There's also a market dimension, and perhaps an area which would constitute or treat with food fraud. All right. I also note the implication for trade was also referenced, and noted during the discourse was the need for institutional strengthening in terms of infrastructure and otherwise in meeting demands for the service. Also highlighted, I noted, was the need for greater promotion, whether it be the services of the bureaus or the standards and certification themselves. So in this context, I can definitely say that we have been certainly sensitized, if not educated, on what exists by way of standards and certification for coconut products, what is required in an ideal setting, and maintaining the science, the rigor behind it, and what could possibly be the way forward. As indicated throughout this webinar, it's in the context of Alliances for Action, with a special focus on the OECS group of countries, focusing on standards for coconut products in these same countries. The whole Alliances for Action approach is predicated on the need for partnerships, recognizing that we really can't do it all on our own. So in this instance, allow me to thank our donors, especially the European Union, who has provided funding under the 11th EDF, European Development Fund. Allow me also to extend gratitude to the CARIFORUM Secretariat, who has made this possible through the Caribbean Regional Indicative Program. Thanks also go out to the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. Bringing it home to the region as well, allow me to, and also the OECS, allow me to express gratitude to the OECS Commission, specifically the Competitive Business Unit, as well as our colleagues at the OECS Secretariat. We also want to give gratitude and thanks to the Coconut Industry Board of Jamaica, arguably the Center of Excellence for Coconuts within the region. Let me also thank our speakers today, the representatives of the OECS National Bureau of Standards, and also the National Bureau of Standards for the countries of Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Really thank you for sharing with us the information on your services, as well as the standards and certifications which are in place at this point in time. We thank you for your stewardship to the region, and we encourage you to continue your efforts in advancing the development and work within the relevant food industries. We also want to extend gratitude to the ITC, the International Trade Center, and the CARDI team who would have assisted in making this possible. You would have been hearing a lot from William, and you would have also been hearing from his colleague as well in terms of helping with the questions today. And a lot of other persons behind the scenes would have made this possible. Lastly, we want to thank you, the participants of today's webinar. We want to thank you for your time and commitment in partaking of this webinar, and we look forward in terms of interacting with you further as we continue work within this space of the coconut industry. I know William will appreciate, before I hand over to him, that I encourage you to visit our social media handles for additional information, as well as to access the recording of today's webinar, as well as past webinars under our Alliance for Action series. So please do visit our Coconut website, do visit our YouTube page. We also have a Facebook page that deals specifically with coconuts. We also encourage you to go there, post some of your questions and queries, or even share comments and photos. And lastly, allow me to encourage you to have a good day as we enter into what for many of us would be a long weekend. So do be safe in this period of COVID-19. Enjoy it, and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Great words.